So we're going to get started, and I want to ask you, how would you describe survival mode?
Well, I think survival mode is, it's a very personal thing to to anybody who is going through it. For me, survival mode was literally putting on like this mask of whether it was trying to put a perfect dress on or making sure I had makeup on or doing whatever and having this exterior of to the world, to anybody that I saw, that is showing them that I was okay and not allowing them to see the brutality and I mean just the awful things that were happening at home.
hmm Survival mode is often described as performance, right?
Uh,
And I can, it's like a masquerade ball, really,
yes.
just trying to get through the day. So I can definitely understand that. Welcome to Survival Mode Disrupted, the podcast for those who are done performing, done people pleasing, and done living life on autopilot. I'm your host, Letitia, the Survival Mode Disruptor, and this is where we create disruptive, unapologetic transformations for those who are ready to exit survival mode and reclaim their power. Every episode is your permission slip to burn the rule book, break the cycle, and finally build a life that feels like yours. So let's disrupt everything that's holding you back and start living life on your own terms. This is your trigger warning. This podcast is raw. It is real and it doesn't sugarcoat what it means to survive trauma, abuse, mental health battles, or even the aftermath of living in survival mode for too damn long. What you hear on Survival Mode Disrupted includes unfiltered stories, graphic details, and a vulnerable truth that may trigger some of the audience. Please prioritize your emotional safety. If something feels too heavy, pause, breathe, come back when you're ready, or not at all. Your healing is yours to honor. These episodes are based on lived experience, not therapy sessions or clinical advice. Listening does not replace mental health treatment or constitute a coach client relationship. If you're in crisis, please seek immediate help from a licensed professional or contact your local emergency services. This space is built with care, but it's also built for truth and built for disruption. Take what you need, leave the rest, and most of all, trust yourself. If this podcast speaks to your soul, you don't have to do this work alone. Feel free to join our free Facebook community for high achieving women ready to break cycles and heal out loud. Join us at Disrupting Survival Mode on Facebook, or grab the book that started this movement, Exiting Survival Mode, a raw step by step guide to help you identify, release, and rebuild from the survival patterns that have been keeping you stuck. Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Survival Mode Disrupted. I am your host, Letitia, the Survival Mode Disruptor, and today we have Karen. So, Karen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Letitia. I'm so happy to be here. It's an honor to be on your podcast. Well, I'm Karen. I'm 48. I'm a single mom, soon to be ex-wife, and I have a 11-year-old boy, and I write a blog called She's Not Done Yet. And it's about the ending of a 15-year marriage to a narcissist, surviving deep financial and emotional betrayal, and rebuilding from almost nothing while I'm in the middle of the divorce and custody process. And I try to do it through some humor and a lot of self-deprecating, laughter. And I think it's just so important to try to get the stigma away, the negative stigma away from abuse. So that is really what the blog is for, and it's been a great outlet for me.
Welcome. I am really excited to have you. Audience, this is Karen's first time telling her story on a podcast. So I'm really, really excited that she has chosen Survival Mode Disrupt to share her journey. So let's start with your story to and through
Okay.
survival mode.
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna add a little just it kind of shows like this OCD mentality that I think that a lot of women in this situation have to like they, whether they were OCD before or not, I think that it's something that you develop because you have to keep track your lot. You say a lot of lies. You have to tell a lot of lies. You do a lot of covering up. And in doing that, you have to be super organized about who you're telling what to. And I kind of laugh at it now, but I mean, but there's really nothing funny about it. I have literal boxes, like 15, maybe 20 moving size boxes full of journals that all have, that are labeled either parents, sister and brother-in-law, brother, cousins, each of the people that, the core people in my life. And I wrote in them exactly what I was every night I would, if I, every time I had an interaction with them and I said something that I had to cover, I wrote it down in these books. So that was my way of compartmentalizing each and being able to keep track of all of the lies because I was protect, I felt like I was protecting them. I was protecting obviously the situation, but I was also, if they had if they had known, I don't know if they could handle it. And I still do that to this day. I have on my bookshelf, there are 10 journals, and that is the 10 core people in my life, and keeping track of what each person knows. Because I think if they knew, I don't know if they would be able to handle knowing what happened. So I guess in with that said, I'll tell you, I guess, a little bit about my story. I married, I got, we got married just over 15 years ago. And yeah, I guess I knew from the beginning that it was not the best situation, but I was also in my early 30s and I was getting nervous that I was not going to I was running out of time. And everybody around me, all my friends, they were married and they were also like starting to have children or having their seconds. And I was just getting nervous that I was running out of time and I didn't have a great self-esteem. Like it was, especially when it came to men, just from childhood being different, being adopted, abandonment issues, there's so much that I could go into, but I'm trying to keep it to the core of which is, the stuff that has happened very recently and the trauma that that it's caused not only me, but my young son. I married someone that I probably shouldn't have, but I am someone I'm scrappy. I'll make it work. It wasn't like I didn't love him. I just wasn't, it wasn't the fairy tale. It wasn't, it wasn't it definitely wasn't the fairy tale, but I said, I'll make it the fairy tale, we can make it the fairy tale. And as we, yeah, I knew from the beginning, I noticed that every time that I would get any attention from whether it was my business or anything, he had to be involved. Like it was, and now when I look back on it, the control that I didn't see at all then is very obvious to me now. But obviously hindsight is 2020, right? But fast forward a few years, a couple of years. We had a very difficult time getting pregnant with my son. My husband didn't want like really anything to do with it. I spent probably $250,000 trying to get pregnant and went through the miscarriages. I went to all those appointments by myself. He just was not, he just wasn't a part, like I felt like he wasn't really a part of it. And that's not to say that when I finally did get pregnant, he wasn't excited and I was overjoyed, but I have a stepson, he had had a child already and it was kind of a lonely pregnancy, but then, we had my son, and that's when all my attention started going to him, to the baby. I noticed that the control started to get even more, and I didn't have as much time I mean, I was building a business. I built a business for him. I won't say we built a business together. I built a business for him. And, I didn't have as much time for that. And my focus was to be a mom. And that really that was when the start of the decline. And then he started to get ill and he was not doing well physically. And we didn't really know what was going on. And we were going to doctors. And at first I thought it was like almost like an intention ploy to get me to, it was, but I don't know, but that's my conjecture. That's conjecture. And it just seemed like the timing, whatever was all right. Turns out he was very sick, but we didn't find that out until much later. And we spent years, going to doctors all over the place and with an infant. And it was very hard. We were living out in Omaha, Nebraska, and that was where the company that we had our agency through, that's where they thought we would be most successful. And so we did it. We took the plunge when we went out there, and I had no support and family out there. And after, 4 years, we came back. And so my husband, he was getting to the point where he was like bedridden, like almost 2 weeks out of every month. And I had an infant, he was turning into a toddler. Like it was unmanageable to be out that far away from family and support. And I couldn't do it all on my own. And we decided to move back to the East Coast where we moved in with my parents. And, that that was in 2017. And that year, for the 4 years it took me to get pregnant, for some reason, I ended up pregnant. And I there are some legal ramifications about it. The one thing I can say is I lost the baby due to medical malpractice and negligence, and that was my last chance to get pregnant again. So that that happened pretty much right after we returned to the East Coast. And that was something that I could not, that was the beginning of like the end for me. And I just was overcome with grief. And then not even 60 days later, my husband was diagnosed with cancer, with a rare cancer. There wasn't even time to grieve and for the loss, and because of the malpractice, we had to get moving on the lawsuit we were suing the hospital, and it's because and then COVID hit. And it was, that, just stretched everything out and made prolonged things, and it almost like put the grief on, I put my grief on hold to now care for a husband who had cancer and COVID, and we had to be careful of germs. We have a child who was like, he was 4 at the time, and it was tough. It was tough times, and I went into full caregiving mode, and it was all about finding the doctors, and because it was a rare cancer, finding the doctors, finding the treatments, doing whatever we had to do for him to try to get him better. And I think I started to not resent him, but resent the fact that it was taking time away from my son. I I wasn't able to grieve my the loss of my pregnancy. And he my husband started to get but he started to get abusive. And we I will never forget this. The morning of the deposition, my deposition, it was he did not want to come with me. And we were in the car driving I finally got him up and we were late. And if anybody knows anything about me, I show up 15 minutes early to everything and sit. That's how I was brought up. And so we're late. I was panicked. I was so anxiety ridden over what they were going to ask me and having to relive this horrible, situation. And my husband was so angry. He kicked my windshield out in the middle of the highway. And that was the first time I realized that he had the capacity to I think that he was trying to kill me. He was so angry and I had to lie and cover that up. What was I supposed to do? Go home and tell my parents that my husband kicked the windshield out on the way to a deposition of me losing my child? Like, I, I don't know what would have happened. I think my father probably would have had a heart attack. He wouldn't know what to do. I don't, so I took it I took it on me. I said I made up something about the rock hitting the windshield, and why nobody saw that as such BS is like beyond me. But how unrealistic that was, that the entire windshield was out. But yeah, that's when it started. That was the start of it. And there were many more situations like that afterwards. And we were living with my parents, but I also, at the same time, he was like bedridden half the time. And his family wasn't, involved. And it's my son's fault, my baby's fault. It's in the middle of COVID. There, there were so many things going on that I, and I had covered up so much that I couldn't, what was I supposed to do at that point? This is rhetorical, but it was awful. And I thought maybe it's the pressure of all of us being in a house during COVID and during these very unnatural times. And I would just made up so many excuses for why all this was happening. And, it's the treatments and all the medication and all the pain meds and all he's not in his right mind. And this is not the man that I married. And this is, he would never, do this. And it wasn't happening in front of my son, God at the time. And it just, it was so overwhelming. I just went with it. And it was becoming very natural to just lie and cover for him. And we got through COVID and I wanted to move to Connecticut. I lived here for 7 years prior to getting married, and the schools are amazing. And I really wanted, once my son was able to go back to school, which was not until third grade because we had to be careful with germs and everything. I wanted him to be in one of the great Connecticut public schools. So we moved to Connecticut. And it was also for me a way to not be under the microscope of my family and having to do all this lying and everything. And I thought that might also help the situation. Like maybe the microscope was too much for him and it was giving him, and just these stupid things that you think of now, like what was I thinking that's some kind of excuse to do with, the horrible things that were happening. But it just got worse. It actually just got 100 times worse once we left my parents' house and moved to Connecticut. And it's, and there's some legal things I have to be careful of, but it got so bad that it was starting to happen in front of my son. And my son was trying to jump in the middle of things. And I was desperately trying to get us out. And I didn't know how because I had spent so much time lying to the people that were close to me and the people who could probably help us. How was I going to go and tell them that this was happening for so long? Like, why would they believe that when I had been lying and saying everything was okay? And then I felt it was just a shame. Like, I felt like, how could I have not gotten my son out? And I just, and he left. He ended up leaving. We had there was a very bad physical altercation. And I think that was, I don't want to conjecture, I mean, it's conjecture, but I think that was I had been trying to get him to leave for years and I unsuccessfully. And I think that last episode, because my son was involved too, I think it might have scared him that he could have, it was, he was getting very close to being at a point where he was gonna, if he didn't kill me, he was getting close. So and he left. He literally gave me 4 hours notice, packed a bag, and left. And even though I didn't know what was going to happen next, I exhaled. After you spend 2 days locked in a bedroom, drinking water out of the bathroom faucet for 2 weeks, like him walking out the door, I was finally able to exhale. And that you'd think was like the start of a good, and it was great because he left on his own, but he left us with about $5, less than $5 in the bank. And he had cleared out every account, taken cash advances on all the credit cards. He literally left me with our son in a very ridiculously high priced rental with less than $5 in the bank. And that was it. We haven't seen him. It's been 11 months. I will never forget the date because it was 3 days before our 15th anniversary, the day that he left. And it, if I didn't have my son, I don't know how I would have survived that, the next few months to come. And I didn't have my family who I told them a tiny little bit of what was going on, and that was enough for them to help me stay in the house and be able to feed my son. And I didn't have a job. I was a caregiver. I was a full-time mom. I was running a business that I wasn't taking a paycheck from. And it took me a long time to find a job. Um, I was traumatized. I had a child who didn't know if his father was ever coming back. I didn't, and it was a really very, very difficult next 7 months until I finally got, I ended up with a great job and I was able to move out of the house of horror, what I call it, and move closer to my family in Connecticut. We were pretty far out from them, but move closer to them so that they could provide help, support me in supporting my son. And now I'm able to financially support us, which I couldn't do for, all those months. But there's debts to be paid and there's, that money didn't come, it wasn't just a gift. And but thank God for family that they would never let my son and I be homeless or anything like that. And, we just happen to live in a very expensive part of the country. And so it has been quite it's been quite a few years. I mean, I think since 2017, really, since I lost the baby, that was really the start. And but the last 3 years were pure hell.
Thanks for sharing, Karen. And I know this is still pretty raw for you, right? My first question,
Yeah.
what has your healing journey looked like?
Well, I have to tell you that I'm not like a self-help. That's not like that's never been my thing. But I mean, I obviously, I have an amazing therapist. Thank God, thank goodness. And she's on call. I could literally call her 24/7. She has, she has witnessed it. She has witnessed it on it while I was on a video chat. Like she has witnessed the abuse. And, so she gave me her number and she said, "You literally can call me at any point." And she's been, an amazing, like she's the pretty much the only person who knows the extent of besides my lawyers, the extent of the abuse and just the horror that happened. But I read Mel Robbins' Let Them. I happened to catch it on a feed on a social media, and there's just something that resonated in that for me. It wasn't like specific to trauma or anything like that, but it was just this message of like, I was holding on to so much anger and so much, and it's like I almost couldn't get past the how could he has how could he have done that, once he left it was like how could he have did this to us, and how could he do this to the son, like all this. I was so angry, and there's just something about listening to her talk about let them, you have no control over how somebody else acts, and the only you have to let them, you just have to let people be them. And I knew that if I did not let go of some of that anger, and that was not that doesn't mean let him off the hook, let them off the hook. That just means let them be who they are, because you can't there's no, not, you don't have any control over that. And and then the second part of the if you don't know anything about the let them theory, it's like let me decide how that fits into my world and how I'm going to handle that. Like after I've let them be who they are. And I didn't, I will never forgive and I will never forget, but it let me, it allowed me to let go of some of the anger and realize that it didn't have to do with me. Like this is his problem. And this is after 8 months that I was certainly not letting, I'm certainly not feeling that at month one, two, three, and four, five, and six. Um, but I think that that message really resonated with me. And and I read the book about 10 times, and there's highlighted notes in those margins, there's, sticky notes. And I've also said I need a healthy obsession. Like I need to pour, I work a lot. I work very hard so that I can support my son and I, because we're not getting any other support. So well, certainly until, the judges are, till this is over. And I needed something I needed an outlet. And so I picked up tennis, and I picked up a racket, and there's a park right down, like literally four doors down. And I played a little bit of tennis, when I was younger, but I was like, there's something about smashing balls that was like very exciting to me. The thought of smashing balls, just metaphor, everything, the metaphor of that and everything. It was, I said, this could be great, or it could be terrible, whatever. And I had a nice racket, and I got a hopper, and I got 150 balls, and I would roll my stuff over to the park. This was before I would do it before I started work. during lunch and after work. So it was like hitting 400, like 400, 500 balls a day. And that is something that it was certainly an obsession. It's a health, if I think it's, there's a lot of things I could do, like I could have turned to, and that was not healthy. And this is something that made me feel good as a professional retired athlete from my youth. To do something so physical was great for me, and it quieted my mind. And I highly encourage it, whether it's tennis or it's, dance or it's whatever. I think that is one of finding a healthy obsession is key. I think it's been paramount to like my healing journey. And I hired a very, very good looking tennis instructor, and that was my gift to myself.
And that's a great way to stay distracted as well. But listen, first of all, I applaud you for your willingness this early on to speak about this, right?
Mhm.
I, as someone who went through abuse for an extended period of time, that first relationship, because I was in multiple abusive relationship, but that first relationship started when I was 14 years old.
Oh my God, that's I can't even imagine. I'm
It,
so sorry to hear.
yeah, and it takes a long time to heal from abuse.
It
It's
does.
not something that happens overnight. It's not something
Mm-mm.
that happens in a year. I'm keeping it real with you.
Yeah,
It
no,
is not something that there's there are phases, right? So
yeah.
first is the awareness phase of
Mhm.
you're now recognizing what actually happened and coming to terms with that, being honest about that, right? And
Yeah,
it may not be honest to an external party, it's being honest with yourself.
yeah.
Because oftentimes, even though we recognize that we are in abusive relationships, we don't recognize how abusive they are until we exit. Then there's this grief period,
Mhm. Oh yeah.
reconciling what was lost, the years lost, the dreams lost, the things that had to be sacrificed in order for the relationship to stay, the loss of safety,
Yeah.
right? The next one is spending time regulating your nervous system, getting out of that state of hypo awareness. I used to get attacked from behind a lot.
Okay.
Because I'm a big woman. Like I'm almost 6 foot. At that time, I was high 300s, which
Mhm.
makes it even seem crazy that I was being abused. But I used to get attacked from behind all the time. That was his way of
Oh,
gaining the upper hand.
okay.
It took
And
me
power.
years. Yes. It took me probably 7 years before I could be approached from behind by someone.
Oh,
The next phase is identity reconstruction, where you are moving away from that label of abuse
yeah.
and trying to reestablish who you are beyond the trauma, what you want, what you now believe as a result of the events that you've been through. And then that last two phases is really learning how to love again and essentially reinventing yourself. And I'm telling you this, and I'm sure your therapist has probably walked you through something similar, but I'm telling you this because the journey ahead for you is still long. And I want to just again encourage you and celebrate you because for you to be 11 months out and so willing at this point to be vulnerable and honest about your experience, and I know that you can't be honest in its fullness because of the legal
Mhm.
ramifications, but Karen, I celebrate you
Thank you.
because this is huge. It took me about 15 years
Yeah.
before I shared my story.
I mean, I think, and I fully hear and like respect that. I think that I have childhood trauma and I've had trauma from past relationships that were maybe not violent, but they were abusive in their ways. I don't want to discredit my family or do anything like that. I don't want to say like, but it is there. I was adopted, so I've had an abandonment issue my entire life, and it is just, I think that I have gone through so many of these of the steps of grief, and I think that that is maybe what's helped me get a little bit. I've been in therapy my entire life because of that. And I mean, even though I would never have expected to be in a situation like this, I mean, it's just not, I, I hear what you're saying about, going through just the steps. And I think that, yeah, because of what I've lived through, I think in my lifetime and the other situations that have been traumatic, not in a physical way, but in other, in emotional and psychological and ways that it has gotten me very, very self-aware. And I'm not saying I'm through this, and I'm not saying that this is, but I felt I didn't have anybody. I was alone. And I think that it was so important to me to, with the blog, that was supposed to be fun. I mean, it wasn't, I was never going to publish it. And then it just like, I kind of just put it, I said, let's just see what happens. And then people were DMing me, like all the women from all over the place were DMing me. They're like, we can't support you publicly, but I just want to let you know that I'm going through this. And I mean, it was like 175 women DM'd me when I put that first post out. And I wrote back to each and every one of them. And I said, this is that we need a community. If I had a community, if I had some place even online just to go and talk to somebody, because nobody understands unless you've been through it, right? There's nobody you can talk to that is going to understand what you've been through and not judge you unless they have been through it. And they are judging you. They are.
Hmm.
I mean, and that's human nature. It is, if you have not been through it, it is, why didn't you just walk out? Why couldn't
Hmm.
you have you could have just driven away. Nobody understands unless you have lived. And I didn't have anybody in my life that had lived it. And I wish I had, like, once I noticed that there was a community like that, there were all these women that were going through this and were all suffering alone. Like, I want to speak out because I want to, and I know this sounds like an oxymoron to say to normalize abuse, but it's not normalizing abuse, it's normalizing
The
talking about
discussion
abuse
about it. Yeah.
and not and taking the trying to take the stigma away from the negative stigma away from it. Because how come we have to live in shame when we're the victims? We are the victims, and yet I feel shame. I feel shame still like that. Um,
I
that,
think the
yeah,
shame is rooted in the fact that there's not enough compassion in the world,
yeah,
right? People are quick to judge, people are quick to label. There's so much victim shaming. It's
yeah,
unreal. And then it makes it harder for people like us to come out and be honest
yeah,
and so we sit in those emotions that don't necessarily serve us. But I
yeah.
think the beauty in you having the courage to release the blogs is just that, breaking down that barrier. And for those who may not completely understand, at least getting a bird's eye view of what it feels like and looks like, right?
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why I lead with storytelling in this podcast, because I really want people to self-identify. Like a
Hmm.
lot of people believe fallaciously that they are suffering alone. No
Yeah,
one would ever
exactly.
understand. And
Hmm.
and we build community through storytelling.
Hmm.
So As we wrap up this
Yeah.
episode, and I know it could go on much longer, but as we wrap this all up,
hmm
tell us how we can find the blog.
The blog is she's not done yet blog.com.
Okay.
And I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all under she's not done yet blog. Um,
Okay.
and I'm also working on a community under the school, SKOOL, the school app to build. I'm working on setting that up right now to give try to give a safe space for for us to come together and be able to talk about the things that we aren't going to do on, on social media. But I just want to place that a place for people that understand that that you're going to go there and say things that people are going to get. I want you to be able to be honest. Like that's what I wish I had. I think that would have been monumentally different. I would have been, it would have changed my life to have that.
Hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
it just felt it's still lonely. I feel very lonely with it.
Mhm. I think it's always interesting that we often create the spaces that we wish we had. And like one
hmm
of the reasons why I am so proud of this platform is
hmm
because I've been able to create spaces for victims to speak their truth in their authenticity, and that's something that I never had. So, Karen, I want to thank you so much
Oh, thank
for
you. No, thank
sharing your
you.
story and being so bold and honest as you could, given the restrictions that you had. And I, again, just celebrate you and I wish you well with everything that you are looking to accomplish. But before we go,
Mhm.
one key takeaway to someone who's listening and resonates with the things that you said today.
I think if I had to, one key takeaway is I would say you're allowed to choose yourself, even if your life is still chaotic and unfinished. You don't have to wait for a judge and you don't have to wait for the paperwork or an apology that's never going to come. Like you're allowed to stop living in survival mode while things are messy.
Mm.
That is your you can move forward and you don't have to feel like like the survival, you have to go through all of those steps in order to move forward. I think that is, and that you're not alone. That's
Yeah,
the biggest thing, the
yeah,
biggest
yeah.
takeaway.
You are not
And I want to
alone.
thank you, Letitia, because not only have you been so patient and I'm sorry for my thank you so much for being so patient with me on the first time that I've done anything like this, but for having this platform. I thank you for giving someone like me a place to talk, a safe place to talk about it. And this has definitely been an experience, but it's been a great one. And you're an amazing host, and I think what you're doing is spectacular. And it was an honor to be here today.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you. Thank you. So, audience, you have caught another episode of Survival Made Disrupted, and I just want to remind you, you were not built to break, but you damn sure were not built to just survive, disrupt the cycle, reclaim your life, and thrive on your own terms. And I will see you next week. Once again, thank you for joining another episode of Survival Mode Disrupted, hosted by the Survival Mode Disruptor, Letitia. You didn't land here by accident. This conversation, it probably cracked something open on purpose. Because survival mode isn't just a phase, it's a pattern, an identity, a prison masked as strength. But here's the truth. You're not broken, you're just unfinished. So if something stirred in you today, don't ignore it, don't numb it, move with it. And I want to once again invite you to join Disrupting Survival Mode, the Facebook community where healing is loud and messy and real. I also want to invite you to buy my book, The Survival Mode Exit Plan, because your breakthrough deserves a blueprint. And if you felt seen today, be sure to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and drop a review. That's how amplify the voices that need to be heard. And remember, this isn't about fixing yourself. This is about finding yourself again beneath the rubble. Until next time, choose ease, choose power, choose you. This is Survival Mode Disrupted. Let's keep shaking shit up.